Hey my dudes, it's Kaitlyn, and today I'm going to be finally showing you guys how I figured out how to make a map for Animal Crossing, but to scale. So as you guys know, I made another map that I will put on the screen right now, which was for a different themed island, and it ended up not being to scale at all. So it really gave me a lot of trouble when I did go to terraforming, and made it just so much more difficult to terraform, so much more difficult to decorate, things like that. So this time around, I am actually going to make a map to scale, and I have most of it done, which I'll show you guys, but I also wanted to share how I did it and show you guys my process. So for this, I'm going to be using an iPad, an Apple Pencil. Any iPad with an Apple Pencil compatibility will work. You will also need an app called Procreate. Now, this isn't the cheapest app ever, especially if you're just using it for this one purpose. But if you want to make anything on your iPad, whether it's drawing, if you want to make a thumbnail, if you want to make any graphics for anything, Procreate is so nice for that. So I highly recommend Procreate. It's one of my favorite apps. So we're going to get started. I'm just going to open my iPad and go to Procreate. I know that you can use Happy Island Designer, and I have used it before. I just had it glitch on me, which is why I don't use the Happy Island Designer online, because it completely erased my map like 3 different times when I tried to make it on there. And it is sort of to scale, but it's sort of not to scale. Not as to scale as this is. So the first step in this is making a grid. So I looked it up, and each square on your map, these squares right here, is 16 by 16 squares. We need to make a grid that'll fit this whole thing. So to make the grid, I couldn't find a transparent one, so I made my own. Import a photo. I found this photo of this 16 by 16 grid on Google Images. I just looked up 16 by 16 grid. I couldn't find a transparent of it, which means it has no background. So you're gonna have to find a grid like this. And then what you're gonna do is make a layer on top of the picture and pick whatever color you want for your grid. I'm just doing black. So to decrease the opacity of this grid picture, I'm just going to use 2 fingers to tap that layer, and the opacity slider comes up. And I'm just going to decrease the opacity so when I draw over it, I can see what I'm doing. So we're going to go to our second layer that's on top. And I think I have a good pen for this, but I'm just going to have to decrease the size. So this is the Studio Pen under inking for the brushes. And I'm just going to compare it, see if it's the size I like. And once I get it to a size that I find correct, I'm just going to start outlining the grid, and we're going to use this as a template for our map. So when you do this, it's going to be hard to get straight lines, but if you just hold, it'll sort of bounce into place. And that's how I'm going to do this. See how squiggly this line is? And then it just bounces into place. And if you end up moving it a little, you can move it back to where you want it. You're going to want to try to make this grid as accurate as possible, just because if it's a little off, you'll notice on your map. So I'm going to finish this up, and then I will show you guys what to do after we get this grid all together. Okay, so now I've completely outlined the grid that we imported from Google. And what you're going to do is see this check mark on the layer with our picture. We're going to uncheck that. And we're also going to uncheck the background. And now you can't really see very well, but our grid is there. It just has no background. So I'm going to go to our gallery and then select our grid and then share it as a PNG, which means it doesn't have a background. And then I'm just going to save this to my camera roll. And now we're all set. So the next step is to make a new canvas. And for this, I just did a square canvas. I already have one set up, so I'm just going to go to that. And what you're going to do is use this button and insert a photo. And you're going to insert a screenshot of your map from your Switch. So there is a way on the Switch Lite you can get a screenshot by taking a screenshot and uploading it to Facebook and really quickly saving it to camera roll before you delete it. That's the trick I use for my Switch Lite. And for your Switch, there's an option to save to phone, and you basically just like scan a code for it and stuff. You could take a picture, like literally just take a picture with a camera, but it's not going to work as well. And I haven't tried it with the grid method, so I don't know if it'll work at all. So for this, I just stretched out the picture so it fit in the square how I wanted it to. And this is basically it. So what we're going to do now is we are going to make different layers. So this layer is just the picture. So the layer above it is just going to be the base layer, which is going to be the basic colors, like literally the first level of our whole map. So this is the base layer. Then we have level 2, which is the second level of terraforming, level 3, and then level 4. Then we have our paths, our water, bridges, inclines, items, trees, buildings, and I will have one for resident services as well because I like to keep that separate since resident services can't be moved, at least to my knowledge. These are basically all the layers I use. You can use as many layers as you want. It just keeps everything separated, so if you do want to edit your map at all, you can erase it without having to erase everything you did and redoing it. Trust me, you want as many layers as possible. So for water, I actually do end up doing of the base layer of water, then the second level of water, and the third level of water, different colors. That helps as well. And you can rearrange these layers however you want. If it's above another layer, that means that when you draw, it's going to cover up whatever's underneath it if you draw over something. So I don't know if these are specifically in the order that I want them yet because I just literally threw them together for this video, but you can get them organized as you draw stuff and figure out what you want on top of what. So one of the first layers I make after I import the picture and size it is swatches. So as you can see, I have swatches up here. You're going to need your base level, so the base level of your island, the second and third level, and it gets lighter as you go higher. And I could have a color for the fourth too, but I'm not terraforming a fourth layer for this, so I don't have that. Then there's water, and I'm going to actually create more colors for water. So this is the base level for water. I'm just going to slide this to make it lighter. This is going to be the second level of water, which is lighter than the first. Wait, let me change my brush really quick. So I'm still using the studio pen. This is the second level of water. As you can see, it sits lighter. And then we're going to slide this again all the way to the lightest we can get it. And this, if it's light enough, which I don't think it is, this is going to be our third level of water. So as you can see, it gets progressively lighter. So first level of water, second level water, third level water terraforming. Then there's the rocks, which is there, the sand, and then this is going to be for buildings. And you might have to come up with more colors for like items and stuff, but for now, this is all we need for our swatches. So if you didn't know, you can color pick if you want to use the exact colors. See, you can't really see that because, I color picked, but you can color pick everything if you don't feel like coming up with the colors on your own, and you can get really creative and do whatever colors you want. So now that I have my base picture in and my swatches, we are going to move to the base layer and fill it in. So the first thing that I'm going to start with is the sand. And for this, we are going to go to make sure we're on the base layer. We won't really have to edit this layer at all, but I'm just going to outline sections of the sand. And plop it and fill it in. And that's how we're gonna fill in our base layer. I sort of forgot, before we do this, I actually wanna get the grid going. So, sorry to jump around, but we are going to get the grid going. So, for the grid, this is going to be our grid layer. And on this layer, it's gonna be a little difficult. This can definitely probably be made easier. But what I'm going to do is insert a photo, and we're going to insert that transparent grid that we had. As you can see, there's no background to it. And we're on the grid layer, so we can move it freely from everything else. And what we're going to do is, like I said, each of these squares is 16 by 16, and this grid is 16 by 16 that we made. So to the best of your ability, line up the picture of the grid to each grid line, and do that until you have the whole map filled. This is the most tedious step, aside from actually decorating your map and like figuring it out. On my map that I'm currently working on, the grid is not perfectly lined up, and I'm still having a pretty fine time. So as you go, after you get the first one positioned, Instead of importing the picture of the grid every time, you can just duplicate the previous layer, and then it'll sit right on top, so it won't look like you duplicated it, but you did. And then line that up as perfectly as you can with the previous one. So once you feel satisfied with how those are lined up, it's obviously not going to be perfect because we're doing this by hand, but once you feel satisfied, you just can duplicate that previous one and keep repeating this until you have a full line of your map filled in. Okay, so now we got the first line all figured out, and as you can see, it gets a little crooked even though it's lined up perfectly. This has to do with, I'm pretty sure, errors in the original grid we made. But what you're going to do is merge down all these grids. You just press on it, press merge down, till all the grids are in one layer, in one grid layer. So it's not going to be absolutely perfect, but I did move them around so it's as straight as possible. And since we have all of those in a single layer, you can move them all at once by just pressing this, and you can adjust them. So what I'm going to do is now just duplicate this entire row and move that so we can create a new row. And again, you're going to line this up as perfectly as possible. It is going to be a little off, and that might bug you, but it's better than not being able to make your map to scale. You know what I mean? So we got our second grid done, and I'm just going to keep duplicating. So I have 3 levels right here. This is honestly better than I did on the one that I'm working on. So now that we have those 3, which is half of what we need, we're going to tap on these and merge them down so they're one. And then we're going to duplicate that layer, and then that fills in the rest of our map. So line that up as perfectly as you can. If you need to zoom in, I don't blame you. And then once you think you have it lined up, you're done with the grid, and you can merge that down, and now you have one whole grid for your entire map. So I don't really like the grid everywhere, so what I do is I'm just going to erase around the edges. So I didn't keep the grid on my beach when I did this, but I'm going to keep it on here because honestly, when you start figuring out what decorations you want on your rocks and your beach, this might be useful. So I'm just going to trace around the entire island with a smaller one and then go around and clean up everything with a bigger brush. Also, a Procreate tip, if you use 2 fingers to tap, it undoes what you just did, and if you use 3, it redoes it. So that's the undo and redo if you're new to Procreate. And now that we've got most of the grid off around the edges, what we're going to do is just increase the brush size and go ahead and clean up the excess grid that wasn't erased yet. Okay, now we have all the excess grid erased. What we're going to do is take the grid layer, like I said, use 2 fingers and tap that layer, and then adjust the opacity to however light you want it to be when you're drawing. So I keep it fairly light, but not too light. So like that is fine for me. And see, you can see the grid, but it's not super black like it was. And when you draw, you'll be able to see what you're drawing underneath it. So now what we're gonna do is, once you have your swatches, you can start filling in the base layer. So just use your color selector by holding down to select that. And we're going to go back to the base layer and start filling in the rest of the beaches, since I only showed you one beach. And like I said, you just make a little outline of a section and drop it with the eyedropper by just pulling from this dot up here. And for this step, if you want, you can turn off the grid because it really doesn't matter. And if there are any existing buildings or anything, you can just draw over them, because the only thing that's going to be static is resident services. So I draw over, like, all my houses are on the beaches right now. I'm just painting over all of them. So I got the beaches done, and now I'm just going to move on to the rocks. And like I said, guys, the base layer, you're doing this all on the same layer because you're not going to be modifying any of this. You really can't modify the beaches or the base level of your island So do not worry about it being on the same layer. And here's the last bit of the rocks. And now what we're gonna do is we're gonna select the color of our base layer, which is the darkest one, and we're gonna fill in the entire map with this color. Go over the buildings, go over everything, because this is your plan. The one thing I'm going to do before this is I'm gonna fill in resident services because we don't move that. So I'm gonna select the building color that I chose and just go over resident services. And as you can see, this is really sloppy, but I'm just gonna fill that in. And that's on top of the base layer, so we don't have to worry about that getting filled in when we do our base layer. So now we select the darkest color for our base layer of our grass area. And we're just going to go over literally the entire outline. You can do this in sections. I'm going to just try and do the whole thing. Just make sure the two ends connect, like the ends of the lines that you're outlining with, so that it just fills in the grass area. Also, if you want to do this whole area, as you know, you can hold it and it'll just zap to how it's supposed to be. You can adjust it. And then now I have that whole outline filled out. And we're just gonna drop it in and the whole thing's filled in. So this is our base layer. I'm gonna see if I can get this water on the outside to just plop on, yep, right there. Since everything's filled in besides the water, we just plop it like with the color dropper and it plops right in. And as you can see, now you have every square for your entire island, every square. So from here on out, it's really up to you. Just make sure you use the levels. So I'm making sure I'm on level 2 because I'm using the level 2 pen. Let's say we're building a cliff somewhere. If we want the cliff to be 3 by 5, we just fill in a 3 by 5 section and fill it in. And if you want to curve those corners, if you want to curve the corners of that or sharpen it up, just use the eraser. Okay, and then we can extend this cliff however long we want it. So here's our cliff, and let's say we want to do something like a building here. Look up how big villagers' houses are. I'm pretty sure they're 4 by 4. Go to the building color and make sure you're on the buildings layer. And then you can map out how much of the cliff you'll have left if you put a 4 by 4 house here. Okay, so we have our villager's house here, and if you see, there's only a 2 block space around. So if you wanted it to have more space, just select the second layer color, go back to the level 2, the second layer, and let's say we want to, have more room and have an incline. We can build this out however we'd like. I know this is sloppy. I usually fix this up with the eraser. So let's say we want a little yard on either side and we want an incline. If we're gonna add the incline, we're gonna go to bridges and inclines. And I don't really have a color for inclines picked out yet. As you will notice, you'll go and have to pick out colors. But I'm just gonna pick a lighter color and add it to my swatches for bridges and inclines. Just a little swatch right here. And then go back to the bridges and inclines layer and draw one in. So a bridge and incline has a little step at the top, and then it's 2 by 3. And now we know that we can fit an incline here, have a little bit of yard space. Let's say I want to add items. So I'm going to add a table. And let's say that's like, I want to remember what kind of table that is. Let's say it's a stone table. I'll select a gray type of color. And let's say that stone table is not as big as it actually is in the game. You can look up dimensions of things, obviously, online. Like literally just look up the item and find a website that has the dimensions. But let's say we want to add the iron garden table. That's 1 square. And we want to add 2 chairs. We're on the items layer, obviously, and we add the table and the 2 chairs. The items you can fill in however you want, or you don't even have to do the items, but I like, with my island, planning out the space that I'm going to have even with the items, just so everything works out as perfectly as possible. So now we have a villager house, an incline, and items here. And let's say you want to add, fencing. I haven't made a fencing layer yet, but you can add whatever layers you want, literally any layers. So let's say I'm going to add country fencing, so I'm going to go for something an orangey brown color so I know what it is. I'm just going to add that right here on the fencing layer. And there you go. We know that there's supposed to be country fences there. And if I want to put a country fence like right here, right back here, I can do so. And the colors are going to help you determine, like, as you do your map, you're going to understand like what colors are what for what items, or you're just going to remember what your plan was. And then let's say we want to make a river. It's literally the same thing. I'm going to pick the base level color for water and bring that about however I want, literally. Keeping it around 4 squares. You can do it way more specific. You can literally trace like, oh, this is going to be 4 squares. So I'm going to have it go up like this for 4 squares. And then turn over here for 4 squares. And then you can just fill that, make sure you connect the ends, and then you can just fill in that little thing, and there you got a river. It's that simple. Now, since we've gone through that, I'm just going to show you guys how far my map is along, because I know you guys are waiting for me to start terraforming my island. Here it is. So I've worked pretty hard on this, and the grid is much worse. I don't know if you can see, but the grid is much worse on this one. This might not make the most sense to you because you didn't make this map, but basically at the entrance, you can see the 3 different colors for the 3 different levels of water. The incline, this silver thing is a stone path. That's the color I picked for it. And then my resident surfaces, you can see the inclines. These are all items that I plan to use. These are wooden bookshelves. These are study desks. Those are lamps. And I just went through here and did all this. Here's my little neighborhood. And yeah, as you can see, when you terraform something more natural, it'll look like this. And you can plan to make sure, you have enough to like round the edges and stuff like that. This is just a really useful way to make your map, and it's a little tedious, but honestly, it is a lifesaver if you want things to be to scale, because as you guys know, my other map, if we can find it, was not to scale at all. This section, I literally fit just this little part in this whole section on my map when I terraformed it. So this is a much better way of doing it. And I hope that you guys, will be able to find this useful. Okay, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I appreciate it so much, and all of your support means the world to me. If you guys want to see more videos like this, make sure to comment, like, and subscribe. I can make a video of another how-to video of how I film my Animal Crossing videos, or how to start an Animal Crossing channel, if you guys would like to see that. And with all that being said, I love you guys so much, and I will see you guys very soon in another video. Bye, guys!